So have the right attitude, go out there and don't let the world change you. You need to change the world. But do have a support network of people. Create a Zoom environment of a bunch of people you think you can get together on. Find people online. People are being flexible. Join a group. Say, can I have a weekly call? And we chat every 2 weeks. I'd like to just have somebody else to talk to and chat through. So you need that support network. But your attitude is what's going to make this work for you.
We have the pleasure of welcoming Jonathan Campbell today to our interview series. I'm Vanessa Rose from the peopleHum team. Let's begin with just a quick introduction of peopleHum. peopleHum is an end-to-end, one-view integrated human capital management automation platform, the winner of the 2019 Global Cody Award for HCM, that is specifically built for crafted employee experiences and the future of work. We run the peopleHum blog and the video channel, which receives upwards of 200,000 visitors a year and publish around 2 interviews with well-known names globally every month. And now for our guest, Jonathan Campbell is the co-founder and CEO of Social Talent, the world's leading learning experience platform for hiring professionals. Jonathan co-founded Social Talent in 2010 and since then has served as CEO and lead on product and content. Jonathan is a regular speaker at industry events including Unleash, SHRM, LinkedIn Talent Connect, and SourceCon, sharing his expertise on the global recruitment industry. Welcome, Jonathan. We are thrilled to have you.
Thank you, Vanessa. Please do call me Johnny. It's only my mother who calls me Jonathan when I'm in trouble these days.
Okay, fine. So the first question I have for you, Jonathan, is could you tell us a little bit about your journey so far that brought you to Social Talent?
Of course. So I started my recruiting career, Vanessa, straight out of university back in 1998. And I worked as an agency recruiter, staffing agency recruiter for many years, doing finance and accounting based in Dublin. And I moved to the Cayman Islands in 2006, I think. So I ran a recruitment agency there for a few years in the sun. And that was fantastic, amazing experience. And whilst there, I had decided to return home and set up a recruiting agency that would recruit offshore people in the insurance and finance world. I found another friend who I'd met on the island who would agree to do this to me, and we set up our business in 2008, in July 2008, virtually working. We were a virtual recruitment agency. I was working from my home in Dublin and my colleague from his home in Cork in Ireland, and we were recruiting for people in the Middle East, in South America, across the Gulf, the States, different parts of the world. Very small, but that was of course July 2008, and the recession, massive financial crisis hit in September. So we had to survive and find a way to innovate, and in doing so, we kind of developed a way of recruiting that was new to us, that involved using the internet and social media sites like Facebook and LinkedIn and Twitter, which were beginning to really open up at the time, and the web, to what we now call sourcing, to source talent. And this worked, and we began to grow. And quite quickly we realized that the real value of this wasn't in running our own agency doing this. It was teaching the world how to do this better. So we started Social Talent in late 2010 as a teaching organization to teach recruiters how to leverage these new technologies to recruit better. And as the years went by, we quite quickly realized to scale the organization, we had to move it online. And we built our own first digital learning platform about 6-7 years ago. And since then, the platform has become the world's largest learning platform for hiring. And we teach tens of thousands of professionals every year how to hire better virtually, online, from sourcing all the way to onboarding and managing talent. We teach anyone involved in the hiring process how to do that. So it's been a journey that I would be lying to say that it was an intentional journey that I thought I would end up right here. But this is where my recruiting career has taken me.
That's a really interesting journey that started from the career. With respect to the ongoing situation, what do you think the hiring world should expect this year?
2020 is a crazy year. I guess I look back on my experience in 2008 and try to see what could I learn from that, and therefore what can we gather from previous times of crisis, although they were very different to this, and try and speculate as to what might change. First of all predictions are slightly wild right now. So it's an opinion, and I certainly wouldn't take this as gospel. I think it's most important that people take several opinions and try and figure out what the world looks like. But from what I can see, there are two crises happening. There's COVID-19, and then there's a recession. And right now, as we speak in late May 2020, the world is still dealing with the COVID-19 crisis and only beginning to deal with the recession. And the recession will bring with it different challenges for hiring and for recruiting. And I fear that we will probably end up having two crises in parallel that have different effects. In general, we're going to see a massive reduction in hiring around the world. That's just an unfortunate consequence of this. I think large enterprises will pull back their hiring, but they are broadly still hiring. 65% of the enterprises we polled last month told us that they are still hiring. Some are doing the exact same hiring, some more, some doing less, but they're still doing critical hiring. And 35% have frozen things or are downsizing their organizations. And those numbers may change as the crisis continues. But for the most part, companies are still hiring, but they are doing less of it. I think if you look at internal recruiting, for those recruiters who work in the in-house recruitment market, the types of roles you may have to recruit for will change. And the people you recruit for those may change. So for example, a lot of large enterprises are asking their in-house recruiting teams to look inside the company for talent, which is something they never had to do before. It's talent acquisition, after all. But these teams, for the first time probably ever in most large enterprises, are being asked to headhunt or source talent within their own organization, which requires different skills, different change of culture and mindset in organizations. But in times of change like this, organizations typically innovate and they have to adapt. And you'll find that not all of the staff you have today will be needed. And you will probably create other new requirements as you remove requirements in the business. So I think organizations are trying to do the right thing, which is keep your staff, but maybe move them around. And this is something that we had predicted would happen over the next decade. It's just happening all of a sudden. As my friend Lars Schmidt says, the future of work is now. A lot of these changes are just accelerating. They're not necessarily new. We're also seeing that virtual working is becoming more of a norm in organizations. It's a requirement right now, but I think most people anticipate it will become much more prevalent when this crisis lessens. And that opens up more opportunities to hire people from other jurisdictions and with different backgrounds. So I think there will be much more diversity in terms of the type of people you can recruit for, because more roles will be able to be done virtually and won't require an office location. So that's going to change the candidate marketplace. It's going to give more opportunities to some candidates and less to others, or at least to others it will give opportunities at reduced salaries and reduced compensation, as hopefully the recruiting environment becomes more equitable, that anybody who wants to do the job can do the job no matter where they are currently based, which maybe will change issues around visas and restrictions and all these things that organizations haven't yet grappled with. And then the staffing agency world is being massively impacted. Perm recruiting is down an enormous amount. But you're seeing these staffing agencies, I think, transition into more what the RPO or recruitment process outsourcers are, which is flexible organizations still delivering recruiting solutions and hiring solutions, but in different ways. And you see a lot of project hiring happening now. Organizations like hotel chains or massive retail outlets who around the world will have to turn back on their stores and their offices and their locations. They'll need to ramp up from next to zero to tens of thousands very suddenly. So in the short term, there will be opportunities for a lot of project hiring like that. But it's just different in terms of the way we would have done things in the past. So opportunities for sure, changes that will be negative as well. And it will definitely require all of us in the recruiting industry to adapt.
Right. Since hiring is gone virtual too, are there a set of rules that organizations should use to engage candidates now?
So I think, I've always felt that there is a better way to engage talent, and that there is a process to it. Obviously, there's a science and there's an art to engagement, and the science part of it says that when you're engaging with talent, there are certain steps you should always take. So, for example, when you're reaching out to talent cold, like talent who you don't have any relationship with, you should try and form or find some alliance or commonality with that person. So a common connection, for example, is a good way. Or research their background and see if you find something in common that you have with them that is uncommon in the wider world. What is the unique approach you're taking to this person? So that personalization piece, that's a standard science, if you like. Don't just read methods in the science part. I would count on are the way that you reach out to talent. You have to basically understand that talent will reply to different mediums in different ways. So just because you enjoy reaching out by email doesn't mean that the other person is going to reply by email. They might be better on Messenger. They might be better on LinkedIn. So trying multiple vectors is extremely important to reach somebody. And the third piece is follow-up. That it's unlikely the person, if they're in demand talent, will reply to your first message. So you have to go through several stages of follow-up, 4 to 7 follow-ups, to try and really exhaust your engagement efforts. So there's elements like that, the science, which is personalization, using multiple methods or vectors to contact somebody, and multiple follow-ups. That is the same the world over. And then there's the art, which is down to how you communicate, the language you use, the words you use, whether to use questions and how many questions, the tone of your message or phone call. And I think that's something that you develop over time and you practice. And that's where the real difference is in terms of somebody who can understand a process and copy it. That's one step. But who has the expertise to develop a methodology. That's kind of, to me, how you best engage with passive talent. So it is the kind of understanding that there are rules, rules being guidelines or best practices. They're the science aspects of engagement. And then there's the art form, which is the learned nuances, the subtleties of language, the subtlety of culture as well, which I think is going to become even more important as the next few months develop. To your previous question, Vanessa, and something that in social talent, we commissioned a new course this month, actually, based on the brilliant work of Erin Meyer. Erin Meyer wrote a book called The Culture Code, which he published a year and a half ago. It's fantastic, and I'd encourage every recruiter to read it or understand it, because she highlights the differences in different cultures around the world. For example, between India and the United Kingdom and the US and France and Germany, and that whilst we are all broadly the same, we are culturally biased to react different ways to different things, like a meeting. Different parts of the world, people from different cultures will treat a start time of a meeting differently. In some parts of the world, you absolutely arrive on time. That somebody says, I'm going to be speaking at 9:45, you're ready at 9:45. In other parts of the world, it's a guideline. We'll talk tomorrow morning is okay. And when you're more likely going to be recruiting in a more multicultural world, because you have a wider candidate pool, more jobs are virtual. I think it's really important to understand these cultural differences, because you can have the science of engagement, but if you don't understand the cultural differences, what is expected in a different culture, I think you might inadvertently create a cultural faux pas in your engagement strategy. And I think that's going to be something we're going to see in the next year or two, is recruiters really needing to understand those cultural differences, because most recruiters probably recruit just within their region and they haven't had to deal with these issues. I think a more virtual work environment requires us to better understand those nuances of cultures.
Yeah, that's a very nice explanation of that. So, an online presence is very important these days. So from a recruiter's perspective, what sort of profile would get the most attention?
So there's two ways of looking at your online presence. One is, how do I get found? And the second is, if somebody is on my profile, are connected to me? How do I get noticed as well? So the first is more about just understanding how some of the search tools work, how Google works, how LinkedIn search works, for example. And a lot of that's based on keywords. So to be found, you need to, first of all, make sure that your online presence contains the right keywords. And you have to think about, most of us want to be very individual, and we tend to do things like change our job title to be a more individual job title, more customized. And you don't like to use the generic job title. But a recruiter or an employer will probably look for the typical name of your job. I want to hire a sales manager, not a business development leader, for example. So you have to make sure that you balance your choice of words on your profile, so that you're using a variety of different words that might mean the same thing, synonyms, and you are considering who might be searching for you, what keywords, what phrases will they look for to be found in the first place. The second is just making sure that when they do find you, that they find something that's warm, inviting, and engaging. So making sure that you, first of all, the information there is the right information. That means that you are highlighting the areas of expertise, and you are demoting or hiding, if you like, the areas that are not appropriate. So on LinkedIn, this may seem obvious, but somebody might find your Twitter account. They might find your Facebook account. And although it's your right to post whatever you want there, and you might use it as a personal forum, you have to remember it could be found in a business context. So you should always, review your online presences and make sure that you are proud of each of them in all contexts that they might be found. So that if an employer, a prospective employer, finds your Facebook profile, you are proud and you will say, well, that's okay. Everything I say there, I'm proud of. I have no problem with an employer seeing. When you start arguing that's personal, that's private, I think that's not the perspective to have. It's that if it can be found, it might be seen, and therefore you should be cautious and do the right thing and be sensible about these things. But also, people want to see a warm face. They want to see your real personality. So make sure that you have a professional photograph, but make sure it injects personality. Don't try to be too professional. You can have you, and you can have your kids, or you can have you in your favorite place. I think that's becoming more acceptable these days. Especially in the virtual world in the last couple of months, where we've learned that it's absolutely fine to have a grandparent or a child walk in on a phone call. I think people don't mind as much anymore. That more of that personal element on your LinkedIn profile. But you want to make sure that you're also coming across as someone who's perhaps engaged in their community, and by that I mean the virtual community. So you are sharing articles, liking articles, commenting on things. Again, remembering that you have to be proud of what people see. So don't be negative, no hate comments, don't get involved in arguments. But if you see something and you like it, you see something you want to share it, it's good to keep an active virtual presence, because it says to somebody that you are engaged in your profession and you're engaged in the passion of the work you're doing. So to me, they're the core things. How do you get found in the first place? It's one way of thinking about your online presence. But also then, what do I find? Make sure it's personable, professional, and make sure it shows that you're an engaged member of your community.
So do you think employers now are they biased to what they see online?
I wouldn't say the word biased, but they are influenced, whether you like it or not. And a lot of the work we do in our training online is to try and teach people how to recognize their biases and make sure that they don't use the bias in the wrong way. And it's never intentional. So Vanessa, one of the concerns that I had recently when I was discussing virtual working and the post-COVID world is that most of us are moving towards virtual interviews, for example. Very practical. You're in your home, I'm in my home right now. But if I'm an employer and I'm interviewing you, Vanessa, it depends. I might see too much of your home. And by that I mean, I might see things that I have a bias towards. I might see that you have children. I might make a judgment on the quality of the furniture in your home. And that is a bias that might make me think you have a certain socioeconomic background. I might think, oh my goodness, she's from a very wealthy family, or oh my goodness, they don't have much money. And these are things that this introduces bias to the recruiter, not intentionally. The recruiter doesn't mean any harm, but they are a risk. And I think we have to be cognizant of that as the recruiter, but also the candidate, is to try and make sure that we remove the opportunity for bias at all times and make it about the skills. I had some recruiters suggest to me that although we're all moving to video and virtually, maybe for an interview, you should use the phone. Because on the phone, it's just about the skills and the conversation and the information. And you don't have the opportunity to introduce bias with what you see, and which isn't necessarily what you should be seeing. And it may be unfair to the candidate. So there's some of the things that make me think around bias these days.
So, moving on, with the increase in the millennial workforce, the gig economy is gaining more relevance nowadays. So, do you think recruiters are prepared for this scenario? How should they prepare for this?
I don't think they are prepared. I think they need to become more prepared. So the gig economy, as people saw it 3 months ago, was very much about contract workers, and it was a smaller part of our economy. It's been growing, but it was smaller. I think we will move more rapidly into a gig economy, because one of the obstacles to gig economy for some roles was that the gig worker wasn't able to come into your office or building or be in the same city, and that meant that gig workers weren't suitable for lots of roles. I think people see that you can be anywhere, and I know I look at my own team in social talent, and we just see each other virtually now on video. So they're mostly still in the locations they were 3 months ago, so in Ireland or in Poland, but technically they could be anywhere in the world. And the fact that they are permanent employees doesn't really matter anymore. But why not the next person be a contract person who does 50% of their hours with us? I think once you see how life can work in this world, you are going to be more flexible. And I think therefore the gig economy is going to grow. I actually don't think it's due to generational issues. I don't think it's due to the fact that there is a larger number of millennials in the workforce. That's not the major driver. That was a driver, and that was driving it slowly. I think COVID-19 is the big driver, and that's just accelerating it for everybody, regardless of your generation. But organizations aren't ready for it. They're not ready to onboard people virtually. They're not ready to build culture with their gig workers. It was easier to separate your gig workers and your permanent staff in the old world, because your permanent staff were the people you see in the office. The gig workers were the people you didn't see. Now everybody's the same. We're all just somebody at the end of a Zoom call. And I think that, back to my point earlier around, I think it creates more equality, because you don't have the status. Nobody really knows your status. You're just another colleague on a Zoom call. And that's actually a really positive thing. But organizations still have the bureaucracy and the way of thinking of old organizations, which treat permanent FTEs, full-time equivalents, different to gig workers. And the legislation in most countries doesn't provide for a more equitable balance between the two. And even the question of, if I want to employ you today, Vanessa, to work for social talent, like there's no reason why you couldn't do a job for us that somebody with the equivalent skills in Ireland could do. Why would you not be suitable for that? You can just log on and do the job. But there is a real issue of, how do I employ you? How do I pay you? The legalities, the taxes, etc. I still think those things are slowly moving and haven't caught up with this new virtual world, the right to work, etc., etc. So I think organizations and economies are still behind, but I think they're going to be forced to catch up, because this is the new world. You have to be ready for this, and organizations and people are going to plow ahead and do it. And if you don't create structures to support them, they're going to circumvent your existing structures and go behind them. So as an economy, they'll just not pay tax. You'll revolute somebody or PayPal them their wages and let them figure it out. That creates a black economy from a tax point of view. And then internally, we'll just break the HR rules because my manager just treats us all the same. I want my team on a call and we'll assign work. So I think people tend to just get on with things. and organizations and economies have to catch up. I think that's what's going to happen here. The people will just move on, and they'll just get on with doing work. And I think everybody else will just have to catch up, and they'll have to catch up fast.
Do you think organizations are accepting of these workers? Because most employers, they want to see their employees working, and they aren't really sure unless they see their employees. So how do you think that's going to work?
You have to trust, but also verify. And the verify part is where most companies don't really have good systems today. So working virtually requires you to rely more on your verification processes. So I spoke to an employer recently who told me that in his business, they had a management meeting every week, but sometimes he wouldn't attend and sometimes the meeting wouldn't happen. And they had a dashboard of KPIs that people had to input into, but nobody really checked. And as soon as they went remote, they had to move to a daily meeting that everybody attends. And he wakes up in the morning and checks his KPIs every day. And to me, that typifies the change that we have to adapt to, which is we have to rely much more on our verification procedures. So for organizations or teams who work in an agile manner, for example, this is easy. You have scrums, sprints, you probably use software to manage that workflow, and you record your completion of work in a managed system. And that's a very, very typical of a type of agile process. Most traditional offices, as you point out, they manage by visually just seeing things are happening. I see people working, as in they look busy, they're on the phone, they're tapping a keyboard, they are working. And we measure activity. I think most of our economy measured activity up till now. And we're going to have to shift fast to measuring outputs, which is a hard thing for people to do psychologically. You don't know if somebody, my father, Vanessa, rings me twice a week. And every time on the call, he asks me the same question. How do you know those people are working? Because to him, he's a 78-year-old man. And to him, the idea that everybody is in their home at the end of an internet connection, just being trusted to get work done, it's crazy. He still can't understand that. He thinks because I can't see them, I can't possibly know they're getting work done. And that is a problem. But you need to bring in software and tools and processes to do this right. And one of the best books I ever read on this, maybe 10 years ago, was a book called Remote. And it's written by the guys who wrote Rework. Jason Friedman, I think, is the guy who's behind it. And Remote was a very honest, real look at virtual working. And it talks about the philosophy of virtual working, which most people are supportive of, but talks about the harsh realities of what you need to have in place in terms of structures, systems, and reporting. And without the latter, virtual working doesn't work, because people's trust only goes so far. You do need to trust, but also be able to verify. So that's critical. And you've seen the stock price of companies like Atlassian and others, Slack, companies that have really good software solutions for measuring outputs and measuring work in this way. They've risen dramatically in the last month. And I think you're going to see more and more companies implementing those in roles that perhaps weren't originally designed for this type of working. But we're going to have to move to many, many different responsibilities and roles being measured in this way. So trust and verify. To me, that's how you do it.
That is really helpful. Moving on to our last question, Johnny. Do you have any sound bites you'd like to share with our viewers?
Sure. More thoughts and about what's happening and what they can do. To me, if you're working in recruiting and talent acquisition, now is the time to make yourself indispensable. I've heard fantastic stories from organizations who told me how their recruiters have been so flexible and helped the organization do other things. Recruiters helping other HR colleagues or non-HR colleagues, whilst they haven't been terribly busy because maybe there hasn't been hiring. They're not willing just to sit there and wait for the work. They're saying, what can I do? I think recruiters tend to have a variety of skills that can be applied to many different jobs. And now is the time for you to show your employer that you can help in different ways. So don't wait to be asked to do something different. Offer your skills. Ask what else can you do? Can you retrain? Can you upskill? Can you help another team? Even if it's just temporarily. They're the employers who will keep their jobs and grow. And also be prepared for recruiting, when it returns to your organization, on scale to look different. I mentioned we might be recruiting different people, maybe internal colleagues, but we also might find ourselves recruiting different roles. I've met many recruiters who 2 months ago were hiring experienced high-end developers, and today they're hiring drivers. And to me, you need to do that with a smile on your face. Recruiting is recruiting, and don't get caught up in the fact that you used to recruit high-end technical roles yesterday. If you're recruiting something else today, that's what the market is looking for. Help organizations and teams recruit that. And so don't forget that, in trying to make yourself indispensable, you're going to have to take responsibility for upskilling. So the knowledge you need, trust me, is out there. There are tons of free resources available for teams, for people to try and figure out how to cope with this. But don't let the world happen to you. You need to happen to the world. You need to basically go out there and say, I'm not going to sit here and let my world be changed by COVID-19 and by this recession. I'm going to change my outlook, my opportunity. I'm going to take control, take charge. And some days it's going to be harder to do. You're going to have to, put on a smile, but find yourself a community of fellow people, fellow recruiters, fellow HR professionals, fellow leaders, whoever that might be, to lean on. You're going to need them because it's not going to be easy every day. So have the right attitude, go out there and don't let the world change you. You need to change the world. But do have a support network of people. Create a Zoom environment of a bunch of people you think you can get together on. Find people online. People are being flexible. Join a group. Say, can I have a weekly call? And we chat every 2 weeks. I'd like to just have somebody else to talk to and chat through. So you need that support network. But your attitude is what's going to make this work for you, or it's going to break you. And the big thing that I've always had, and a big piece of advice I've always given people is, it's your choice. All right. You cannot change many things in life, but you can change the decisions you make. You can change the attitude you choose to have to that. And now is the time to really, really shine. And it's really, really the time to do what's right for you and others. And trust me, if you're wondering what to do, helping others is the absolute way to go right now. And try and find somebody else who might need that encouragement and might need a support network, and reach out and offer your help to them as well.
That is some really positive and wonderful advice, Johnny. Thank you so much for that. Now is really the time to work on ourselves and to help others.
Exactly.
Thank
It's
you.
been such a pleasure speaking with you today, and I hope you stay safe. I hope you've got a positive attitude and you've got a good network to support you as well.
Thank you so much, Johnny. It was really a pleasure talking to you.
That's all. You take care.
Bye. Take care.